Welcome to today's historical deep dive, where we strip away the kings and castles to find the pulse of ordinary lives. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. Forget the dusty textbooks. We're stepping into the rough weave of their reality. We're here to feel the chill they felt, to grapple with the fears they faced, to witness the quiet resilience etched into their very bones. This isn't a fairy tale. It's the grit and grace of survival, generation after generation. If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. What would be your craft, your burden, your small hope? Let's begin and live the life they never got to finish. You wake before the sun. It's not a gentle transition, but a brutal wrenching from shallow sleep by the insistent gnawing in your belly and the bone-deep chill of the hut. The straw prickles through your threadbare tunic, offering scant warmth against the persistent cold that seems to seep from the earth itself. A cold embrace that never truly leaves. The fire pit in the center is a heap of gray ash, mocking the memory of last night's feeble heat. A stark reminder of the fuel saved, of the warmth forgone. Your breath hangs in the air, a tiny cloud in the perpetual gloom that fills the small space. Beside you, your spouse shifts, a restless bundle under the thin wool blanket, their breathing rough with the night's chill. Children are curled together near the hearth, seeking warmth from its cold stones, their breathing light and quick, vulnerable. Outside, the world is stirring too, the distant lowing of the Lord's cattle, a sound that reminds you whose land this is, whose rules you live by. The nearer cough of a neighbor pierces the quiet, a familiar rhythm of morning sickness and hardship. Then, the sharp, metallic clang from the blacksmith's forge, already at work, a sound promising dawn, even if the sky remains dark. It's not yet light, but the day's labor has already begun in the body and the mind. There is no ease into this life, only the abrupt return to its demands. Every morning is a small act of will, a conscious choice to push back the fatigue and the cold and face the relentless cycle. Your muscles ache from yesterday's work, a dull throb that promises more of the same today, likely digging or hauling or mending. There is no question of staying abed, no luxury of leisure or quiet contemplation. To rest too long is to fall behind, and falling behind means hunger, cold, means failing those who depend on you utterly. This immediate physical confrontation with existence sets the tone for everything that follows. It is a life lived entirely in the present, dictated by the body's needs and the land's indifference. You rub your hands together, feeling the rough calluses that speak of endless labor, the dry skin cracked by wind and water. Another day to survive, another day to toil, another day in this skin, in this time. Ask yourself, would you find the will to rise, day after day, when survival is the only horizon. You grope in the darkness for kindling, dried rushes, small twigs gathered yesterday after the fields. Your fingers are stiff with the cold that permeates the very mud and straw of the hut walls. Beside you, your youngest coughs again, a shallow, wet sound that scrapes at your nerves. The chill bites deep this morning. Blowing on the embers of last night's fire is a ritual, a prayer whispered without words, coaxing warmth and light back into the dark, airless space. You cup your hands around the faint red glow, inhaling deeply, a desperate gamble against the lingering chill. Smoke fills the air, a thick, acrid cloud that stings your eyes, makes them water uncontrollably, and clings to your clothes, your hair, the rough blankets on your bed. It's the constant perfume of your life, a scent that speaks of fire's precious necessity and its inefficient production. Every breath is laced with it, a reminder that survival is a messy, smoky business. Breakfast is a meager affair, identical to yesterday's and likely tomorrow's. A chunk of hard bread, the loaf baked perhaps days ago, stale and dense. You break off a piece, feel the rough, gritty texture. You soften it slightly in a little weak ale, if the brew hasn't run dry, or just water, if you're less fortunate. Maybe, if the harvest was good last year, and the rats haven't claimed too much, there's a handful of dried beans to chew on, hard and tasteless. Meat is a rare dream, a feast reserved for saints' days, or after a successful hunt by the Lord's men. Crumbs, perhaps, shared with his tenants. Fresh vegetables are tied to the fleeting, unpredictable mercy of the seasons. A brief burst of green in summer, gone quickly into the long gray. This isn't eating for pleasure. It's fueling a machine, a body that must endure hours of relentless physical labor. The sun is not yet up, but your muscles already anticipate the ache of the plow, the hoe, the carrying of heavy loads. Every calorie is accounted for, every meager morsel precious. There is no snacking, no casual consumption, no eating when you are not genuinely, deeply hungry. Hunger is not a fleeting discomfort you can solve with a trip to a well-stocked larder. It is a familiar companion, a constant, low-grade state of physical want that shapes your thoughts, your anxieties, your very worldview. It dictates your pace, limits your aspirations, determines the length of your days. Could we today truly comprehend such a constant, low-grade state of physical want? We talk of diets and food trends. They spoke of survival and the next harvest, watching the sky for signs like prayer beads. The surprising insight here is the utter dominance of physical need. Survival isn't just a priority, it is the priority. It stripped away layers we take for granted. There is no room for existential angst when your stomach constantly rumbles. There is no leisure time for abstract thought when every waking hour is spent seeking sustenance or shelter. This constant state of scarcity bred a practical, often brutal pragmatism. Why worry about tomorrow's salvation when today's meal is uncertain? This state of being lived generation after generation, baked into the very bones of society. It created a world where faith was often less about theological nuance and more about appeasing a god who controlled the weather, a god whose wrath could mean famine. Superstition wasn't just quaint belief. It was a desperate attempt to control the uncontrollable, to cajole a capricious universe into yielding enough grain to live. The casual wastefulness of our age, the abundance that allows us the choice of what and when to eat, would be utterly alien, perhaps even morally repugnant, to a mind forged in the constant, biting reality of medieval scarcity. They lived closer to the edge than we can easily imagine, their lives a constant negotiation with the harsh, unforgiving demands of the physical world. Was their resilience born of strength, or simply the absence of any other option? The raw air bites your cheeks the moment you step from the low doorway, unfolds before you, not just ground, but the very anchor of your world. It is mud under your worn boots, the smell of turned earth after a spring rain, the dust that coats your throat during a dry summer. You are not born the land, you are of it, consumed by its rhythms, beholden to its unpredictable temper. Every clod broken, every furrow plowed, is a silent plea, a deep-seated gamble against forces you cannot command. Look at the seeds clutched in your hand, a handful of future. You place them carefully into the soil, a ritual as old as the village itself. But this act of faith is shadowed by constant, gnawing fear. Will the late frost bite them back to nothing? Will the floods drown the young shoots, turning promise into watery waste? Will the blight descend like an unseen plague, blackening the stalks and leaving emptiness where sustenance should be? You pray to the patron saint of harvests. You hang charms thought to ward off pests. You look nervously at the sky, reading portents in the clouds. Your life is a perpetual wager against nature's whim, a desperate dance with forces far greater than yourself. The harvest is not just food, it is survival, the difference between a winter of hunger and one of mere hardship. It is a victory bought with sweat, aching bones, and a desperate, fragile hope. This relentless connection shapes everything. Your identity isn't found in a craft unless it directly serves the soil, like the blacksmith mending a plowshare, nor in abstract ideas, and certainly not in possessions beyond what feeds and shelters. You are first and foremost a tiller, a sower, a reaper. Your standing in the village is tied to the strength of your back and the fertility of your small plot. Your wealth is measured in bushels of grain and the health of your few animals. Your purpose is inscribed in the turning seasons and the demanding needs of the earth. They understood, in their bones, a fundamental truth. You are subject. You bend to the land's will, or you break. Contrast this with the dizzying rootlessness of the world you know. Your identity is a shifting tapestry of profession, digital presence, things consumed, ideas debated in placeless spaces. Theirs was grounded, heavy, immutable. Would we, perhaps, find a lost stability in that profound connection to place and purpose? Or would we find only crushing confinement, a life dictated by forces outside our control, stripped of the myriad choices we now take for granted? She kneels by the row of struggling beans, whispers a prayer older than the stone church, not just for the crop, but for mercy, for the land to be kind this year, for the relentless uncertainty to ease, just for a little while. For them, the earth was mother, provider, and stern, unpredictable master, all at once. They lived and died by its grace, bound completely to its powerful, indifferent heart. Welcome to today's historical deep dive, brought to you by Sleepy History. You wake in darkness. The fire is out. Beside you, your youngest coughs. Again. The air is thick with the smell of damp earth, wood smoke clinging to cloth, and unwashed bodies. Outside, the wind whispers through the thatch, a sound you know better than any music. You've never seen a toothbrush. You believe demons live in fog. Your town blames goats for the plague. Welcome to the Middle Ages. It's a world built on faith, fear, and the raw struggle to simply survive the coming winter. A world where life expectancy is short, disease is a constant shadow, and the church is as powerful as any king. Forget the romantic notions of knights and castles. For most, life is mud, manure, and the endless cycle of the sun and seasons. It's a life where the boundary between the natural and the supernatural is thin, porous, and terrifyingly real. Every creak of the wood, every strange light in the marsh could be a sign, a warning, a presence. Your understanding of the world is filtered through generations of oral tradition, snippets of scripture you barely understand, and the grim lessons learned from those who didn't make it. We're not here to judge them. We're here to understand, to peel back the layers of time and see the world through their eyes, feel the grit beneath their fingernails, hear the prayers whispered in terror. This is a journey into the heart of human resilience, into the beliefs that held communities together even when everything else threatened to tear them apart, into the quiet triumphs and crushing defeats that defined the lives of ordinary people whose names history has mostly forgotten. If you love immersive, real storytelling about survival, belief, and forgotten lives, hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Your support allows us to keep exploring these untold stories. Drop a comment with the medieval fact that surprised you most, or what role you think you'd play if you were born in the year 1287. Would you be a farmer, a craftsperson, a village healer, maybe even dare to dream of the cloister? Prepare to step back in time. Feel the chill. Taste the fear. Experience the hope that somehow bloomed even in the harshest soil. Let's begin and live the life they never got to finish. The morning mist curls over the fields, gray tendrils reaching across the stubble. A child's wail pierces the quiet from a nearby cottage, another life struggling to cling on. In your world, the air itself seems to hold invisible forces, capricious and powerful. A sudden gust of wind isn't just weather. It could be the breath of a demon stirring mischief. The blight that takes half the wheat crop isn't just a fungus. It's the work of an envious neighbor with the evil eye, or perhaps divine retribution for a sin unknown. This pervasive belief in the unseen shapes your every action. You hang iron horseshoe fragments above the door to ward off malicious spirits. You wear a small pouch containing a dried herb or a relic fragment, blessed by the priest, against illness or bad luck. Before you start a significant task, you make the sign of the cross, asking for God's protection, but also perhaps whispering an older, more primal invocation learned from your grandmother. This intertwining of Christian faith and ancient superstition isn't seen as contradictory. God is powerful, yes, and the saints can intercede, but the devil and his minions are ever present, working their evil in the physical world. The boundary is blurred. The church preaches salvation and damns heresy, but the village cunning woman is still sought out for curses, cures, and lost objects. The priest might admonish against charms and fortune-telling, but when a cow stops giving milk or a child suffers from fits, practical need often overrides doctrinal purity. You live with a constant, low-grade anxiety, a feeling that malevolent forces are always lurking just out of sight, waiting for a lapse in vigilance, a moment of weakness. Every unexplained event, every misfortune is interpreted through this lens of spiritual warfare. Was it just bad luck? Or did you forget to bury that eggshell corner first, inviting ill fortune? The insight here is how the absence of scientific understanding created fertile ground for belief systems that offered explanation and, crucially, a sense of agency. If the plague is God's wrath, perhaps repentance and prayer can appease him. If your neighbor's cow is barren because of a curse, perhaps a counter-charm can break it. These beliefs, while often irrational and sometimes leading to scapegoating, blaming witches or outsiders, provided a framework for understanding a chaotic world. They offered rituals that brought comfort and a sense of control in the face of overwhelming vulnerability. They weren't just quaint customs. They were essential survival tools, psychological anchors in a tempest of uncertainty. The weight of this unseen world pressed down on you daily, heavier than any physical burden. Ask yourself, in a world without science, would you rely solely on faith, or would you too turn to the whispered secrets and folk remedies just in case they offered a different kind of protection? Would you dare challenge a belief everyone around you held, knowing the potential cost? Your survival wasn't just about food and shelter. It was about navigating the treacherous landscape of the perceived spiritual world, making the right gestures, saying the right words, constantly vigilant against unseen threats that could ruin your life or steal your soul. The sun is a concept, but light is a daily necessity. You rise not because a clock dictates it, but because the first gray light filters through the smoke hole or the single oiled cloth window. Your world is ordered by natural rhythms, the crowing of the cock, the movement of shadows, the slow arc of the sun across the sky, and the eventual descent into darkness, where candles are a luxury, and the fire is your only defense against the encroaching cold and the fears that come with night. This daily cycle dictates life, but the larger cycle of the seasons governs existence itself. Spring means back-breaking plowing, the hope of germination, the hunger of the lean months before the first new crops appear. Summer is relentless labor under the hot sun, weeding, tending, praying for just the right amount of rain. Autumn is the feverish rush of harvest, the most critical time of the year, when the bounty that will see you through winter must be gathered, threshed, and stored. Winter is the slow, cold endurance test, relying on the stores, mending tools, huddling around the fire, praying the food lasts and the sicknesses don't come. Life is dictated by these cycles, immutable and demanding. There is no separation between your work and your life. They are one and the same. Your dwelling is also your workshop, your stable, often sharing space with the animals for warmth, your kitchen, your nursery. Every member of the family, from the youngest child capable of scaring crows to the oldest grandparent who can still mend nets or twist rope, has a role in the collective effort of survival. The concept of leisure, as we know it, is non-existent. There are feast days, dictated by the church calendar, welcome breaks filled with communal celebration, rare moments of abundance, and temporary respite from the grind. But even these are often tied to the agricultural year, celebrating a successful harvest, blessing the seeds for planting. The surprising insight here is how this total immersion in the natural world and its demands shaped consciousness. Time isn't abstract. It's the duration of a task, the distance the sun has moved, the growth of a plant. The weather isn't just conversation. It's the most critical factor in your survival, dictating famine or plenty. This intimate, constant relationship with the physical world fostered a deep, practical knowledge of your environment, the signs of coming rain, the habits of local wildlife, the medicinal properties of plants, mixed, of course, with those strong beliefs in magic. Yet, it also created a profound vulnerability, a constant awareness of your dependence on forces entirely outside your control. A hailstorm can destroy a year's work in minutes. A persistent drought means starvation. This precariousness breeds both deep humility and a stubborn, tenacious resilience. Ask yourself, could you live a life so utterly bound by the sun, the soil, and the unpredictable whims of nature? Or would the lack of control, the constant threat of ruin from forces you cannot command, break your spirit? Their existence wasn't just survival. It was an ongoing conversation with the raw elements, but dialogue spoken in sweat, prayer, and the quiet determination to see the next season through. The dawn breaks cold and gray. The fire is rekindled, a meager warmth in the damp air. A quick, simple meal of coarse bread and perhaps some watery pottage fuels the body for the day ahead. Your day is a relentless cycle of physical exertion. Pushing a heavy wooden plow through stubborn soil, the damp earth clinging to the share, requiring every ounce of your strength to keep it straight. Swinging a sickle under the beating sun during harvest, your back screaming, your hands blistered and raw, cutting stalk after stalk until your vision blurs. Threshing grain with flails until your arms ache with a deep, burning fatigue, and dust coats your lungs, making each breath a rasp. There are no machines to ease the burden, only simple tools crafted by the village smith, heavy, functional, demanding. The plow is wood and iron, requiring you and an ox, if you are lucky enough to own one, or part of one, to drag it through the earth. The sickle is a curved blade requiring skill to use effectively without cutting yourself. The flail is just two pieces of wood joined by leather, used with rhythmic force. The work is monotonous, repetitive, and utterly necessary. Each task flows into the next, from breaking the ground to planting, weeding, harvesting, threshing, winnowing, grinding. There is no concept of a weekend or paid leave. You work from sunup to sundown, 6 days a week, sometimes 7, during critical periods like harvest or planting, when every moment counts. This constant physical grind is the engine of medieval peasant life, fueling not just your own survival, but the survival of the village, the lord, the entire social structure. Your body is your primary tool, your greatest asset, and your most vulnerable point of failure. The insight, the value of labor, is not abstract. It is the direct, tangible result of your sweat and muscle. You see the furrows you've plowed, the grain you've threshed, the fence you've mended, the thatch you've repaired. Your worth is defined not by ideas or wealth or status, but by your capacity to produce the fundamental necessities of life. There is a brutal honesty to it. If you do not work, you do not eat. It's a simple, unforgiving equation etched into every aching muscle fiber. This stands in stark contrast to our modern world, where work is often invisible, abstract, performed on screens or in meetings, its results disconnected from physical effort. For the medieval peasant, labor was a direct, physical conversation with the earth, yielding tangible results that meant the difference between living and starving. There is a quiet dignity in this directness, even amidst the pain. In our world of often invisible, abstract work, could we appreciate labor when its output is so immediate and essential? Or would the sheer physical pain, the unending monotony, the lack of choice in what you do, break us? Would the constant ache in your bones, the perpetual exhaustion, extinguish the will to keep going? Their resilience wasn't just mental. It was deeply, physically embedded, a product of a lifetime spent in the brutal dance of labor, where survival was the partner and the rhythm was set by the demands of the earth itself. The clay bowl sits before you, worn smooth by generations of hands. Inside, a thick, steaming mass. It is the color of the earth itself, mottled with the darker hues of cooked peas and lentils. This is your meal. This is almost every meal. This is the litany of lentil soup. You lift a wooden spoon, carved perhaps by your own hand or your father's. The texture is coarse, often grainy from undigested husks, or the simple, unrefined milling of whatever grain made its way in. Oats, barley, maybe a handful of wheat flour if you were lucky, mixed with the ubiquitous legumes. The smell is earthy, damp, and utterly devoid of spice. No exotic pepper, no fragrant cinnamon that you've only heard whispered about in tales of distant lands and wealthy lords. Just the smell of boiling water, vegetables pulled from the ground, and the underlying hint of smoke from the hearth where it has simmered for hours. This coarse pottage is the anchor of your day, the bulk against the emptiness in your belly. Peas, beans, lentils, they are the steadfast, humble soldiers against hunger. If it is late summer or early autumn, the earthy sweetness of root vegetables might offer a fleeting moment of variety. A turnip, a parsnip, pulled from the soil you toil on. In the warmer months, wild greens foraged from the edges of the woods or the side of a field might provide a slight change in flavor or texture, but the base remains the same. The soup is thick, meant to fill you, to sit heavy in your gut, to silence the gnawing ache for as long as possible. Meat is a ghost at this table, a scent remembered, a taste savored only on rare feast days, or perhaps the tough, salted flesh of the single pig you might keep, slaughtered in the late autumn and carefully preserved. If you are desperate, if the hunger is sharp and the risk seems smaller than the pain, perhaps you dare to snare a rabbit from the Lord's forest, risking not just a beating, but the loss of a hand or worse. That stolen meal is eaten in fearful silence, every mouthful tinged with the bitter flavor of potential punishment. There is no concept here of flavor profiles, of culinary experience. There is only consumption, only the basic act of transferring matter from bowl to mouth to belly. Every spoonful is a victory against the constant, low-grade fear that hums beneath the surface of your life. The fear of not having enough. Not enough food to work the fields tomorrow. Not enough to keep the fever from your child. Not enough to see you through the lean months of winter. This isn't anxiety about choosing between chicken or fish. It is the primal dread of nothingness, the stark contrast between your reality and the unimaginable abundance of our modern world, where food is discarded with casual indifference, is a chasm wide and deep. You eat every crumb, every drop, not out of piety, but out of necessity. Wasting food feels like spitting in the face of God, the saints, and the brutal reality of the harvest's uncertainty. The insight here is profound. You do not eat for pleasure. You eat for subsistence. The act of survival is the meal itself. The monotonous litany of the pottage is a daily prayer for continued existence. It shapes your relationship with the world, your deference to the Lord who controls the land, your constant watchfulness over your tiny patch, your suspicion of neighbors during lean times. Hunger is not just an empty feeling, it is a moral compass, sometimes bending towards desperation, sometimes towards a fierce, protective insularity. Ask yourself, honestly, if your understanding of enough has been warped by excess. Can you truly grasp a life where every single meal, this bowl of bland, thick soup, is a testament to sheer, stubborn survival? Was their repetitive diet a form of quiet suffering, or did it breed a deeper appreciation for the simple miracle of sustenance itself? A miracle we have perhaps forgotten how to see. The smoke bites your eyes, thick and gray in the pre-dawn dark. You shift on the straw pallet, the rough weave of a shared wool blanket scratching against your cheek. Beside you, a cluster of bodies, husband, children, perhaps an aging parent or a sibling's child taken in. The air is heavy with the accumulated breath of sleep, the faint, distinct musk of the animals huddled near the far wall for shared warmth. A sow and her piglets, maybe a few chickens, roosting on a beam. This is the hearth and the hovel, the entirety of your world indoors. It is one room, a single shared space, built simply because building is hard and materials are often scarce. The walls are woven branches, plastered with mud and straw, wattle and daub, surprisingly effective against the wind, less so against driving rain. The roof is thick thatch, home to mice and insects, a constant potential fire hazard that hangs heavy overhead. Underfoot, the floor is packed earth, sometimes softened with fresh rushes, which offer a brief illusion of cleanliness before they become saturated with spills, mud, and the inevitable waste of shared life. Light is a luxury, a fragile thing. It filters hesitantly through the open doorway when the weather allows, or through a small, unglazed opening high on a wall, often shuttered against the cold or rain. Most of the time, the interior is dim, lit only by the fitful glow of the hearth, or a precious tallow candle, when tasks demand it after sunset. There are no separate chambers, no doors to close for solitude. Privacy is a concept as alien as the distant lands rumored to be paved with gold. Your entire life unfolds within these four walls, witnessed by everyone you share them with. Births happen here, often witnessed by the community's women, squeezed into the space. Deaths happen here, the body laid out until burial. Every argument, every moment of intimacy, every sickness, every fear whispered in the night, it all occurs within earshot, within sight. Furniture is sparse, built for function, not form. A rough table, maybe on trestles so it can be put away. Simple benches, a few heavy chests, iron-bound if you are fortunate, holding your family's meager possessions, spare clothing, a few tools, preserved food, maybe a precious inherited item. These chests also serve as seating or surfaces. And the pallets, stuffed with straw that needs regular changing, laid out wherever space allows for sleeping. Sleep is not a private retreat into dreams, but another state of shared existence, punctuated by snores, coughs, the shifting weight of bodies, the restless stirrings of animals. At the heart of this single room is the hearth. It is the engine of survival. It provides the warmth that pushes back the relentless cold, the constant damp that seeps into bones. It cooks the thin porridge, bakes the coarse bread, boils the water for meager stews. Its fire is a beacon in the oppressive dark, a gathering place for stories told low in the flickering light. But the hearth is also the source of the smoke that fills the air, stinging eyes, coating everything in soot. If you are lucky, there is a smoke hole in the thatch roof, a gap that allows some of it to escape, along with precious heat. Often, it simply hangs in the air, eventually filtering out through gaps and cracks, leaving a permanent, acrid scent. This dwelling is not a sanctuary of individual comfort or a canvas for self-expression. There are no personal touches, no decorations beyond perhaps a cheap religious print tacked to a beam, or dried herbs hung for their scent or supposed protective properties. It is a functional shelter, a physical barrier against the elements, and above all, a communal hub. Life within it is about the collective, about shared survival. Every action impacts everyone else. Sickness spreads like brush fire in the cramped space. Arguments can't be retreated from. Every meal is shared, every task undertaken in close proximity. Could we, raised on notions of personal space, private rooms, and solitude as a necessity for mental well-being, truly adapt to this constant, inescapable closeness, where the boundaries we build around ourselves, physical, emotional, mental, are simply non-existent, where the sounds and smells and presence of others are a constant, unavoidable reality from the moment you wake until you finally succumb to exhaustion? Or would the sheer lack of solitude feel like a slow strangulation, a prison of mud and thatch from which there was no escape, no moment to just be alone? The insight is sharp, almost painful. Your home was your world, but it was never truly yours. It belonged to the group, to the need for collective survival. To carve out an interior life, a hidden self, in this constant presence would have been a feat of quiet, desperate strength. Was it even possible? Or did the self simply blend into the communal breath, the shared heartbeat of the hovel? The air bites, thin with the coming frost. You sit hunched by the dying embers, the smell of smoke clinging to your rough wool. Beside you, bundled figures stir. This is the family hearth, the beating heart of your world. But look closer. It's not just warmth and shared stories. It is the engine of survival, the fundamental brick in the wall against oblivion. Children are not just cherished souls. They are future hands, future strength. From the moment they can toddle, they have a task: gathering sticks, watching younger siblings, chasing errant chickens. There is no concept of a childhood free from labor. Your eldest son, barely a man, already shoulders the plow alongside you, his back strong, a mirror of your own weary form. Your daughter learns the loom, the dairy, the garden, skills as vital as any spoken prayer against the flux. Every mouth to feed is also a pair of hands to work. A healthy, growing family is your greatest asset, your only true security against famine or ruin. This is the quiet, brutal logic of your life. Love is braided with necessity. Marriage, it arrives not with flutters of the heart, but with careful calculations across scarred wooden tables. It's an alliance, the merging of two small streams of hardship to create a slightly larger one, hopefully strong enough to turn a mill wheel. Your own marriage was arranged. You saw your spouse's sturdy build, their family's decent patch of land, perhaps a shared cow or two brought as dowry. Romantic love is a concept for traveling troubadours and the distant. Gilded courts, not for the muck and sweat of the field. Yet affection grows, stubborn and deep, like roots gripping stony soil. It's born of shared sunburnt backs, shared fear during the long winter, shared relief when the harvest is good. The bond isn't built on individual happiness, but on mutual life or death dependency. And the elders? Your grandmother sits in the corner, her eyesight failing, her hands gnarled by decades of toil. Once, she was the linchpin, a repository of knowledge about herbs, weather signs, the old ways. Now, she is another mouth. Respected, yes, if she still offers wisdom or helps with the smallest tasks. But if she becomes truly infirm, a drain on precious resources, the unspoken tension hangs heavy as the Lenten fast. There's no cushioned retirement, only the gradual fading and the hope of a quick end, or at least a mild winter. The cycle is stark. Born into labor, live through labor, become a burden, or pass on. The profound insight. Family relationships are fundamentally intertwined with brute survival. Affection exists, fierce and real, but it is layered within a framework of inescapable obligation and economic necessity. The bonds are forged in the fires of shared hardship, not the gentle warmth of personal choice. We today have the immense luxury of prioritizing love, individual dreams, and emotional fulfillment in our family structures. Ask yourself, could you build genuine connection under the crushing weight of such constant, shared physical and economic struggle? Or would that relentless pressure tear the very fabric of human feeling apart? The air thickens with the wood smoke rising from the communal oven, a beacon drawing figures from their scattered cottages. You join the shuffling line, your own dough wrapped carefully in a cloth, the quiet morning broken by the rising tide of voices. This small patch of trampled earth, near the well or the blacksmith's forge, is the village's beating heart, its unroofed hall. Life here isn't lived behind closed doors. It spills out, merges and tangles. Every face is known, every gait familiar. The old woman with the stoop complains loudly about her failing crops. A young mother boasts of her child's first tooth. Two men argue, low and heated, over a boundary stone they swear has moved overnight. This constant buzz is more than just background noise. It is the web that holds you. When the fever takes hold, It is Elsbeth from down the lane who brings a watery broth and murmurs old charms. When the storm rips a section of thatch from your roof, neighbors arrive, hammers and straw in hand, before you even ask. The planting of fields, the back-breaking work of harvest, these are not solitary efforts. You lend your strength to your neighbor's land, knowing they will lend theirs to yours. Tools are shared, burdens lightened, sorrows acknowledged with a somber nod or a shared tear. Without this mutual dependency, survival odds plummet. The isolated soul is a vulnerable one, easy prey for hunger, illness, or misfortune. Yet, this closeness comes with a price. Every argument whispered in your hovel is likely heard or guessed at. Your successes are noted, your failures dissected. That petty squabble over the escaped goose now involves half the village, requiring the steady hand of the reeve or the wisdom of the village elders to untangle before it festers into a feud that could cripple the fragile harmony. Reputation is everything, a shield and a cage, a perceived slight, in unexplained absence from the Sunday gathering, a husband's harsh word to his wife, overheard. All are fuel for the endless churn of gossip, shaping how others view you. How much help you can expect when trouble inevitably calls. There is no escaping the collective gaze. We, in our time, curate our interactions, seeking solace in solitude, building walls of privacy, choosing who enters our lives and who remains outside. They had no such luxury. They were thrust together by necessity, bound by the land, by the Lord, by the sheer unavoidable fact of shared existence. Their bonds were forged in shared hardship and celebrated in communal feasts, a vital, pulsing organism where individuality was often subsumed by the needs of the whole. It was a constant state of being seen, of being accountable, of being inextricably linked. Ask yourself, would the unquestioning support, the safety net woven by 100 familiar hands, compensate for the relentless, suffocating lack of privacy? Was this constant immersion in the collective a source of profound comfort, or a stifling, inescapable cage? Beyond the mud and thatch of your own hovel, past the communal oven and the shared well, sits the stone. Immovable, imposing, it rises on the slight hill overlooking the village, the manor house. It casts a shadow, not just of stone and timber, but of authority. This shadow falls across every field you work, every mouthful you eat, every child you birth. This is the domain of the Lord, and you are bound to it. You owe him, not just coin which you rarely see, but sustenance wrenched from the earth with your own calloused hands. A portion of the harvest, bushels of grain, sides of smoked pork, stacks of firewood, goes directly to his storerooms before your own family is fed. This is the rent, the non-negotiable price for the privilege of farming his land, land that your family has worked for generations, land that feels like yours, but fundamentally is not. Then there is the corvée, the forced labor, days pulled from your busiest season to mend his fences, plow his fields, repair his road, all while your own crops risk rot or pest. It feels like bleeding time and strength directly into his coffers, time you cannot spend ensuring your own survival. But it is more than just labor and tribute. Your life is governed by His permission. You want to marry the girl from the next hamlet? Ask the Lord, or perhaps His steward. Permission is a formality, usually granted, but the need to ask is the point. It underscores that your union, your family's future, is subject to His approval. You wish to sell that yearling pig to buy a new iron pot? Permission. Want to visit your ailing cousin 3 villages over? Permission. To leave the village altogether? Almost impossible without His explicit, rare consent. Your feet are tied to this soil as surely as the roots of the ancient oak by the stream. When disputes arise, a stray pig rooting up a neighbor's garden, a quarrel over boundaries, a minor theft, it is the Lord's court that sits in judgment. Or, more likely, His bailiff, a man of petty power whose word is law within the courtroom walls. Punishments can be harsh, swift, and often involve fines that drain your meager resources, or physical penalties that leave lasting scars. There is no appeal beyond His grace. His power here is absolute, a small kingdom where His will dictates the rhythm of life and the definition of justice. The crushing insight? You are not a free agent. The chains are invisible, forged of tradition, debt, and the sheer force of His position. But they are heavy. Every aspiration, every decision, every struggle for survival is filtered through the reality of His authority. You may see Him rarely, a distant figure perhaps, or feel only the pressure of His appointed officials, but His influence is an ever-present weight. We chafe at regulations, complain about taxes and authority figures in our own time. But imagine owing your very ability to live, to marry, to move, to be, to a single, often indifferent individual. Would you accept this hierarchy as the natural, divinely ordained order, whispering prayers for a just Lord? Or would the suffocating lack of personal freedom be an unbearable burden, a constant ache in your soul? Would you bend or break? The church stands. It dominates the skyline of your small world, even if it's only slightly larger than your barn. Built from rough-hewn stone and roofed with thatch. If you live near the Count's castle or a wealthy monastery, perhaps it boasts true stone arches and glass that catches the rare sunlight, depicting martyrs or scenes from the life of Christ in fractured jewel tones. This building isn't merely a place you visit on the Lord's day. It is the very heartwood of existence, the anchor in a swirling sea of unpredictable nature, sudden violence, and persistent hunger. You attend Mass. The priest drones in Latin, a language utterly foreign to your ear, yet you follow the rhythm. You kneel when others kneel, cross yourself when they do, muttering the familiar sounds of the Pater Noster and Ave Maria, understanding the intent, if not the syntax. The ritual is everything, a shared motion, a communal breath against the darkness. You light a thin taper before the dusty image of Saint Anthony, praying for the return of the sow that wandered off yesterday. You murmur to Saint Agatha, hoping to ward off sickness of the breasts for your wife. Every ailment, every task, every small hope and looming dread, has a celestial advocate, a specific saint who might intercede for you in a spiritual court as real and complex as any earthly manor. Fear is your constant companion, woven tightly with faith. You fear God's terrible judgment, a wrath described in vivid, terrifying sermons. You fear the devil and his myriad demons, seen in shadows, whispered temptations, or the sudden, terrible illness that takes a child before the harvest. The agricultural calendar, the very pulse of your physical survival, is inextricably linked to the church's year. Rogation days, when the fields are blessed to ensure a good crop. Harvest festivals thanking the Almighty for sustenance. The long, lean period of Lent, mirroring the scarcity of winter stores. The spiritual world is not separate from the physical. It is the physical, infused with divine and demonic forces. This pervasive belief system provides hope, the hope of heaven, of intervention, of understanding why things happen. The bad harvest isn't just bad weather. It could be God's displeasure. The illness isn't just weakness. It could be demonic influence or a test of faith. Faith explains the unexplainable, offering a framework, a narrative, in a world where scientific understanding is non-existent. It offers a sense of control. If you pray hard enough, confess your sins, light the right candle, perhaps you can influence the terrifying forces that govern your fate. It is comfort in the face of unimaginable hardship, even if that comfort is predicated on constant vigilance against sin and eternal damnation. There is a strange, melancholic irony in finding solace in a power you are taught daily to fear. Ask yourself, in a life stripped bare of modern certainties, where would you anchor your hope? Could you find purpose, even comfort, in a belief system that permeates every breath, every fear, offering salvation at the cost of constant, low-grade terror? You wake before dawn, not to the chirping of birds, but to the unsettling quiet of the world outside your wattle and daub walls. A raven calls, sharp and solitary, from the skeletal branches of the winter oak. Your gut clenches. One bird means sorrow. 3 mean a wedding. 4, a birth. You quickly touch the small, worn leather pouch tucked beneath your tunic. Dried comfrey root inside, meant to ward off ill fortune. These small rituals are the air you breathe. The world is not merely mud, straw, and aching bones. It is alive with unseen forces. Demons do not reside in abstract hells. They are the cold draft that brings the shivering sickness, the unseen hand that turns milk sour, the whisper in the dark that drives men mad. They are real, immediate threats lurking just beyond the firelight, needing constant vigilance and appeasement. You know which days are auspicious for planting the beans and which portend disaster. Friday, the day of the Passion, is best avoided for starting a journey. A broken mirror isn't bad luck because a saint decreed it. It's bad luck because the crack signifies a break in the veil between worlds, allowing something malevolent to slip through. When a neighbor's cow sickens, you don't ponder contagion. You look for who might have cast an envious eye, who might have muttered a curse. Perhaps the old woman down the lane is a witch, conversing with dark powers? Fear, cold and persistent, whispers such possibilities into the long nights. Why this intricate, often terrifying tapestry of belief woven alongside official church doctrine? Because in a world without microscopes, without germ theory, without understanding crop rotation or weather patterns beyond observation, explanation must come from somewhere. A sudden fever isn't a virus, it's a demon possessing the body, or a punishment for sin, or the result of a curse. Crop failure isn't nutrient depletion, it's God's wrath, or the devil's work in the fields, or a vengeful spirit angered by a forgotten offering. This lack of scientific understanding creates a universe teeming with potential dangers, but also potential magical interventions. A saint's relic, a blessed herb, a protective charm against the nightmare that sits on your chest while you sleep. It offers a desperate, human attempt at control in a world that offers very little. Consider the weight of navigating this existence. You live surrounded by invisible threats and potential remedies, forever scanning for omens, constantly seeking protection. Would you embrace the rich, often contradictory comfort of these rituals and beliefs, finding solace in the idea that you have some agency against chaos? Or would the sheer, pervasive fear of the unseen, the constant dread of inadvertently offending a spirit or drawing the devil's attention, leave you crippled by anxiety? Your life is a tightrope walk between piety and superstition, hope and pervasive dread, all dictated by forces you can perceive only through signs and whispers. She grips the straw mattress, knuckles white. The pain has been a wolf tearing at her for 2 days, but it's the fever now, the burning, that steals her breath. Beside her, the midwife mumbles charms she learned from her grandmother, mixing a poultice of unknown herbs. Willow bark, maybe? Something else bitter. You watch, helpless. There is no physician, not here, not for you. There is prayer, the hope a saint might intercede, and the knowledge that countless women have died just like this, bringing new life into the world. Childbirth is a passage, yes, but it is also a potential grave. It is a simple cut from a sharp bone while skinning a rabbit that swells and turns black, stealing the use of an arm, then creeping towards the heart. It is the cough that racks the village every winter, picking off the weakest, leaving empty chairs by the fire. Sickness is not an abstract concept here. It is a physical presence, a shadow that stalks every home. The water you drink, drawn from the stream where livestock also drink, and waste is sometimes dumped, carries unseen enemies. There are no paved streets, no sewers. The air itself can hold the stench of decay, a fertile ground for unseen miasmas you believe are carried on ill winds or by evil spirits. You might try bathing, perhaps once a week if you're near a river or well with clean water. But the concept of microscopic germs is alien. Your understanding of the body is based on humors, on balances that are easily tipped by cold or heat or bad air. Bloodletting, performed by the local barber whose other tools are for shaving and pulling teeth, is a common remedy, a desperate attempt to rebalance what feels wrong within. Sometimes it helps. Often it weakens you further. It is an act of faith, a ritual against the unknown. There is a raw, visceral acceptance of death here that is jarring to modern sensibilities. The church bells toll frequently, for a child lost to fever, for a woman in childbirth, for an old man withered by time and hardship. Charnel houses, where bones are stored because graveyards are full, are a common sight. You grow up knowing death intimately, seeing bodies prepared for burial, witnessing grief not behind closed doors, but in the open squares. The average life expectancy is low, perhaps 30 or 35 years on average, a figure skewed heavily by the terrifying infant and child mortality rates. If you survive the gauntlet of childhood, avoiding the coughs, the flux, the simple accidents that kill, you might live into your 40s or even 50s, a truly venerable age. But even then, your body is a fragile vessel, easily broken, easily extinguished. The surprising insight? Survival here wasn't just about avoiding large-scale catastrophe like plague. It was a constant, daily negotiation with your own physical form, a body utterly susceptible to the smallest imbalance, the tiniest cut, the most common cold. We, in our age of antibiotics and sterile surgeries, fight tooth and nail against every illness, expecting not just survival, but comfort, a long life free from pain and disability. We see death as an enemy to be pushed back at all costs. Could you cope with the ever-present possibility of sudden death? With seeing sickness and loss as a common thread weaving through the fabric of life, not an anomaly? Would it make you more resilient, harder against the inevitable sorrows, or more fatalistic, simply waiting for the next blow? Ask yourself, is our fear of death a luxury born of safety, or is their acceptance a strength we have lost? The deep cold has teeth. You wake in darkness. The stored grain supply a constant, gnawing anxiety at the back of your mind. Winter presses in, a heavy cloak of gray sky and biting wind that seeps through the cracks in your wattle and daub walls. Survival isn't about ambition now. It's about simply enduring. Days are short, measured by the slanting, weak sun that barely climbs the horizon before sinking again. Nights stretch endlessly, marked only by the dwindling logs on the fire and the rhythm of breathing or coughing beside you. This is a time for repair, for mending torn clothes and sharpening dull tools, for huddled stories that blur the lines between fact and fearful superstition. You pray for milder weather, for saints to intercede against the frost's deadly grip, for the stored turnips and hard bread to last just one more week. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the air softens. The first tentative green pushes through the mud. Spring arrives not with a fanfare, but a desperate urgency. The fields must be plowed, the heavy earth turned to face the sun. Seeds, precious and vital, must be sown with prayers whispered for rain, but not too much, for warmth, but not scorching heat. This is a time of frantic hope, fueled by the memory of winter's hunger and the promise of future harvest. Your life becomes an extension of the field, aching muscles, dirt under fingernails, eyes constantly scanning the sky. There are no weekends, no holidays dictated by a calendar. Your schedule is dictated by the sunrise and sunset, the needs of the growing plants. Summer is an intense, relentless grind under the sun. Weeding, watering if you're lucky enough to be near a stream, chasing off birds and pests. The days are long, your back aches constantly, and the heat shimmers off the fields, blurring the line between sweat and prayer. Every green shoot, every swelling ear of grain is a tiny victory against the ever-present threat of failure. Blight, drought, hail. Your connection to the earth is absolute. Its health is your health. Its fertility, your family's survival. There is a profound, simple truth in this dependence, a clarity that perhaps we, with our insulated lives, can barely grasp. Would you trade our artificial schedules for this primal rhythm? Autumn is the climax. Harvest time is a communal frenzy. Every able body pressed into service, cutting, binding, carrying the precious bounty from the fields. It is back-breaking work, often done in a race against impending rain or frost. But there is also immense relief, a collective exhalation as the barns fill, as the promise of winter sustenance is secured. A brief period of celebration follows. Feasts born of gratitude and exhaustion, before the cycle begins its slow descent back into the lean, cold months. Your sense of time is circular, tied to the turning of the seasons, the phases of the moon, the life and death of the crops. There are no abstract deadlines, only the relentless, beautiful, terrifying march of nature's year. The insight sits heavy. Time wasn't a line stretching into the future. It was a wheel turning, bringing the same challenges, the same tasks, the same hopes and fears, year after year. Your existence was a reflection of the Earth's cycles, providing a deep, undeniable connection to the natural world. But this connection came at a price: absolute vulnerability to nature's whims. A late frost, a summer drought, a sudden storm during harvest. Any of these could mean starvation. There was no cushion, no safety net, only the hope that this year the wheel would turn kindly. Ask yourself, would you find a profound peace in that deep connection to the earth's turning, or overwhelming anxiety about nature's absolute, indifferent control? Section 14. Fleeting Feasts and Joys. The plow stands idle in the furrow. The loom is silent. The relentless rhythm of sun-up to sundown labor pauses, dictated not by your weary bones, but by the turning of the church calendar, by the name of a saint you barely know, or by the fat moon signaling a harvest complete. It's a feast day, a saint's day, or the brief, riotous release of the harvest celebration. This is not the thin gruel and hard bread of your daily existence. Today The impossible happens. Smoke, thick and savory, curls from the communal fire pit. Perhaps a pig, painstakingly fattened, turns on a spit, a sight that makes your stomach clench with anticipation and disbelief. The smell, a rare miracle of roasted meat, fills the air, mingling with the earthier scent of brewing ale, thin and cloudy, but potent enough to loosen tongues and limbs. A worn fiddle scrapes out a lively, clumsy tune, joined by a pipe or a drum beaten with calloused hands. People, usually bowed by toil, stand taller. Laughter erupts, genuine and unrestrained, bouncing off thatched roofs and stone walls. You watch your neighbor, usually grim-faced and silent, attempt a jig, his heavy boots pounding the packed earth, a grin splitting his face. Children, freed from chores, chase each other with shrill cries of joy. Old women, their faces a map of hardship, nod along to the music, maybe sharing a rare piece of fruit or cheese. Storytelling happens around the fire as twilight deepens into the long, cold winter night. Tales of saints and sinners, of cunning foxes and foolish lords. Tales you've heard 100 times, but which still hold power in the shared warmth and closeness. These moments are islands of pure, unadulterated human connection in a vast ocean of struggle. They are earned, deeply and profoundly earned, through months of back-breaking labor, enduring cold, hunger, and fear. The insight burns bright as the bonfire. Joy is not contingent on ease or abundance. It is found in the shared experience, the simple act of being together, of momentarily shedding the weight of survival. It is amplified by the contrast with daily hardship, making the rare taste of sweetness, the sound of laughter, the warmth of shared fire, almost unbearable in their preciousness. They had little, yet in these fleeting moments, they possessed something profound we often lose track of in our abundance. Ask yourself, do we need constant comfort and material ease to find happiness? Or have we simply forgotten how to find genuine joy in the simple, earned, shared moments that are woven into the basic fabric of human life? Could you appreciate a single apple, a night of warmth, a neighbor's smile with the same depth of feeling they could? The fleeting feast ends. The fire dies down. Tomorrow, the work begins again. But for this brief night, life was not just endured. It was lived with a fierce, simple joy. The great hall of the manor is drafty, even in summer. Dust motes dance in the shafts of light from the high windows, illuminating the faces of your neighbors gathered before the dais. This is the manor court, the curia. Here, the lord, or more likely his steward, sits in judgment. Today, old Thomas is accused of stealing a few chickens from Agnes. A small thing, perhaps, but in a life lived on the knife edge of hunger, it is very serious indeed. A few chickens are the difference between a thin belly and a starving one. You stand with the others, shoulders pressed together, listening to the accusations, the hesitant denials. There are no lawyers here, no complex legal codes printed on paper. There is only the steward's interpretation of custom, his mood, and the Lord's ultimate power hovering unspoken in the air. Thomas pleads poverty, a bad harvest last year, mouths to feed. Agnes, red-faced and tearful, points to a scrap of feather found near his hovel. The evidence is flimsy, circumstantial, built on village gossip as much as anything tangible. But it is presented. Justice here is not blind. It sees class. It sees favor. It sees who serves the Lord best. The steward looks at Thomas, a man who has always been a little slow, a little apart. He looks at Agnes, whose son is a skilled carpenter valuable to the manor. The decision isn't just about chickens. It's about maintaining order, enforcing the Lord's will, and extracting fines that fill the Lord's coffers. A small fine might be ruinous for Thomas, forcing him deeper into debt or dependence. A harsh one could mean the stocks, public humiliation, a broken spirit. Or worse, banishment from the only home he's ever known, cast out to face the wolves and the cold roads alone. You watch, your stomach tight. You know Thomas. Know he's often hungry. You also know Agnes wouldn't lie unless driven by real loss. But your personal knowledge matters little. What matters is the steward's judgment. This is the reality. Your safety, your security, the very roof over your head and the food in your children's mouths is contingent on the arbitrary decision of a man whose primary loyalty is to his Lord, not to abstract notions of fairness. There is no concept of rights as you understand them, only privileges granted by the Lord, or customs that the Lord's court chooses to recognize and enforce. Your fate can truly rest on the mood of a single powerful person. How do you live under such a system? Do you fight? There is no higher court, no appeal beyond the Lord himself, and petitioning him directly is risky. Do you simply accept? Most do. You lower your gaze, conform, try not to attract attention. Keep your head down. Survival is a pragmatic acceptance of your place in the fragile social order, a constant negotiation with those who hold power over life and death in your small corner of the world. The justice you receive is a reflection not of objective truth, but of the Lord's interests, the steward's biases, and the delicate balance of power within the village itself. It is a sharp, chilling insight. The shield of law is not for you. It is a tool wielded over you. Thomas is found guilty. The fine is steep. You see the hope drain from his face. He will struggle to pay. He might lose his small plot. The bell tolls in the distance, marking the hour, a sound that has accompanied birth, death, prayer, and this small, arbitrary act of justice for generations. You turn away, the dust still dancing in the sunbeams, carrying the weight of what you've witnessed. You rise with the sun, not because a clock tells you to, but because the cock crows and your gut aches with the familiar pre-dawn hunger. Your name is John, or perhaps Aethelflaed, but that is merely a label, a sound others use to hail you across the muddy yard. Who you are is not a question you ponder while staring at your reflection. There are no polished surfaces here, save perhaps the priest's silver cross, and you certainly aren't looking in that. You see yourself reflected, not in stillness, but in motion. In the calloused palm extended to help your neighbor lift a heavy beam. In the way the women nod in approval as you knead the dough just right. In the stern yet familiar gaze of your father as he teaches you to mend a fence. In the tired but loving eyes of your spouse across the hearth fire. You are John, son of Thomas the miller. You are Ethelfled, wife of Edric the farmer, daughter of Agnes the weaver. Your identity is a web woven from these connections, a knot tied firmly to the people around you. You are a member of this village, its fate intrinsically bound to yours, its triumphs your joy, its sorrows your burden. You are a tenant of this lord, your land held in fealty, your duties clear, service, dues, loyalty. Your position in the hierarchy is fixed, like the sun's path across the sky. You are a child of God, one soul among many striving for salvation, your worth measured not by your unique thoughts or feelings, but by your adherence to divine law and the grace you demonstrate through prayer, humility, and contribution to the communal spiritual life. There is no concept of finding yourself in the solitude of introspection. Yourself is already found, defined by your function, your place in the established order of things. You are a tiller of the soil, your hands shaped by the plow, your rhythm dictated by the seasons. Your identity is in the furrow you turn, the seed you plant, the harvest you bring in. It is in the spinning wheel that hums your days away, in the loaves you bake, in the babies you bring forth. Your worth is tied directly to your contribution, to the village's larder, to the Lord's coffers, to the continuation of your bloodline, to the glory of God. To conform is not a loss of self, but the very definition of being a functional, valuable part of the herd. To stand out too much, to deviate from the expected path, that invites suspicion, perhaps seen as the work of the devil, or simply foolishness that endangers the fragile balance of the community. Your horizons are limited by the boundaries of your village, perhaps a day's walk to the nearest market town if you are fortunate. Your news comes whispered on the wind, carried by the occasional traveler, or proclaimed from the pulpit. Yet, within this small world, your purpose is crystal clear. Survive, work, reproduce, pray. There is a profound simplicity, perhaps even a brutal clarity, to a life where your role is predetermined, your duties are visible, and your value is reflected in the health of the crops, the growth of your children, and the blessings you receive, or the hardships you endure, interpreted as God's will. Consider the quiet melancholy of this existence, devoid of personal ambition as we understand it. Your greatest hope is not personal fame or fortune, but that your children might have slightly fuller bellies than you did, that the next harvest will be bountiful, that your soul will find peace in the next life. Is there a peculiar freedom in having so few choices, so little room for error or existential doubt. Your path is laid out. Your identity is given. Your value is determined by your function. Ask yourself, in a world that demanded you see yourself only through the eyes of your neighbors, your family, and your God, could you truly find belonging? Or would the quiet voice of an unfelt individuality wither and die, unseen and unknown even to yourself? Could you find purpose and belonging in a world that valued the collective and the traditional over the individual and the novel? You might not recognize the face in a modern mirror, but everyone in the village knows exactly who you are and what you contribute. That is your identity. You stand, perhaps, in a field that has been worked continuously for 1,000 years. The furrows beneath your feet tell a story of endless toil, of hands long turned to dust, of countless lives lived and lost under these same immense skies. The peasant's life was not a grand epic, but a quiet testament to resilience, a relentless cycle of rising with the sun and sleeping when darkness fell. They found purpose in the earth's rhythm, forged community in the face of scarcity, and held on to faith when all else seemed uncertain. It was a life that, by our comfortable standards, appears brutish, defined by physical hardship, limited horizons, and constant vulnerability to forces beyond their control. They knew hunger intimately, the ache of cold deep in their bones, the sudden, terrifying grip of sickness. They feared the unseen forces of evil whispered about in dark corners, and the very real threats of a failed harvest or the Lord's swift, brutal wrath. They lacked the abstract knowledge we possess, the global awareness, the scientific understanding, yet they held a deep, intimate comprehension of their immediate world, the subtle signs in the weather, the needs of the soil beneath their fingernails, the mechanics of their simple tools, the complex web of relationships with their neighbors. They lived with the constant, heavy weight of fear, hunger gnawing at their bellies, the biting chill of winter, the sudden onset of plague that could empty a village in weeks, the terrifying prospect of eternal damnation, the crushing failure of the harvest that meant slow starvation for their family. Ask yourself honestly, are these fears truly so different from our own deepest anxieties, merely translated into the language of a different age? We worry about financial collapse that can leave us destitute, environmental disaster threatening our world, the sudden illness that can shatter our lives, the gnawing isolation in a connected age, the uncertain future of our children. Have we genuinely evolved beyond the fundamental human struggle for security, belonging, and meaning? Or have we simply built elaborate, often fragile structures and systems to rebrand the ancient challenges of survival and vulnerability? The life of the medieval peasant, bound to the earth, living with dust on their hands and prayers on their lips, serves as a stark reminder. Beneath the layers of technology, progress, and societal complexity, the core of the human experience, the desperate desire to live, to connect, to find some semblance of hope and meaning, remains remarkably unchanged. They held on to a fragile thread of existence, bound to the earth, and they endured. They endured through plague and famine, through war and oppression, through the relentless, unyielding turn of the wheel of the seasons. Perhaps, in their simple, grounded existence, in their unwavering connection to the fundamental truths of birth, life, and death, there was a wisdom about what it means to be human that we, in our complex, disconnected world, are still desperately searching for. They feared the devil's breath in the cold night air, but still rose with the sun to plant the seeds of hope in the spring. They had no legacy carved in stone, no portraits painted for history, but every furrow they plowed, every seed they planted, every prayer they whispered in terror, every child they brought into this harsh world and raised with fierce love, built the very foundations of the world we now take for granted.